These are my best picks for all-in-one orchestral sample libraries. So, sample libraries that include the entire orchestra, all the instruments. They're a great entry point for every aspiring composer, no matter if you want to do film scoring, video game music, or epic cinematic soundtracks. An all-in-one orchestra often adds the most value as a first orchestral sample library for beginning composers. Each of the orchestral sample libraries I cover in this video has its unique sound, workflow, depth of content, and of course, price. What they all have in common is that these are amazing orchestral sample libraries that cover a lot of ground, and I'll help you figure out which one is best for you. Share your favorite all-in-one orchestral sample library down in the comments. First, we have Nucleus by Audio Imperia. Nucleus has a cinematic sound that's perfect for hybrid orchestral music. I love Nucleus for its out-of-the-box, tight, processed sound, especially in those tight, short articulations. It's like super cinematic. It has a good hall sound to it, but it's also really snappy, and I love the overall feel of these shorts. This was an ensemble patch. You can also, of course, load the individual instruments, the violins, the cellos, and basses, and it sounds like this. A bit more focused, maybe. The cool thing about Nucleus is that it has a modern mix, which you just heard, and a classic mix, and you can change it with one button. If you press here, you can switch, and the classic mix makes Nucleus sound a lot more suitable for your general orchestral needs. It's a more tame sound that works better if you're composing more traditional orchestral pieces. Now, Nucleus has no additional microphone positions, just these two mixes. It costs $449 regular price, and it goes down until $225 during this Black Friday sale. I would say this one is the best all-in-one orchestra if you're starting out and want to compose hybrid, epic orchestral music. Why? Let's see what content Nucleus has, and then it all makes sense. With Nucleus, you have full control over the basic instrument sections of the orchestra. So for the strings, that's violins, violas, cellos, basses. There are no second violins, but there's a software button to sort of emulate this. For the brass, you have the trumpets, French horns, trombones, tubas, and a dedicated low brass patch, woodwinds, flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons. There are full ensembles, and there are pre-orchestrated patches, for example, like cellos and double basses playing together. There is a percussion section where you have tonal percussion and atonal percussion, all of the instruments that you would sort of expect. There is a choir, very nice, with soprano, alto, tenor, basses, soloists, and a harp, as well as basic cinematic sound design. So that's the instruments of Nucleus. But how do they work, and what can we expect in the sample depth? Well, Nucleus has basic articulations, I would say. There are legatos for some, but not all instruments. I would say the important ones that play melodies in modern cinematic music are covered. For example, the violins, the cellos, the French horns, trumpets, as well as all soloists. There is no legato for violas, woodwind sections, or the lower brass patch. Let's take a listen to the legato. I think the legato note transitions sound good in Nucleus for an all-in-one orchestral sample library, and they will be enough for most melodies. There are long sustains and shorts, like very tight spiccatos or staccatissimo for the woodwinds and brass. The sound of Nucleus in general pierces through a mix. It's great for epic walls of sound. Listen to this, for example. the same one with the individual instruments. These are some of the best cinematic short notes for strings that I've heard. It's maybe not necessarily because of the pristine sample quality, even though it's really good, but also because of the processing of the modern mix, which makes it like out of the box sound really nice. Here's the shorts with a proud brass fanfare. And with the individual instruments. There are also a few characteristic articulations like tremolos and pizzicato for the strings, trills for woodwinds, but no advanced articulations. It really focuses on the basics. Now, the solo instruments in Nucleus are super great to have as an aspiring composer, and they are not super deeply sampled, but they do get the job done. That sounds pretty good. And this solo flute and solo oboe together. Seriously, that's good. The percussion in Nucleus is focused more on the orchestral percussion side, and it sounds good. Very tight, very direct, and it really can pierce well through a mix. I would say it's missing a bit on the epic cinematic side, unlike the rest of Nucleus, where it's like really tailored to this really processed and piercing sound. I would like if there would be, for example, maybe taiko ensembles, or even like some trailer hits and impacts or booms, rises, because Nucleus wants to be a modern orchestral sample library, and they do add some sound design, which I will show you later, and overall like the way that the orchestra sounds. I feel like the percussion is a tad bit on the traditional side, and I think they could have ramped it up a little bit more by adding maybe one or two like secret sauce thingies for cinematic tracks. Nonetheless, great sound. The tonal percussion in Nucleus covers the essential instruments and the basic articulations. For example, we have timpani hits, but also like crescendo rolls, tubular bells. I love tubular bells. I love them in all of my gothic, huge orchestral tracks. Got a Glockenspiel, or as Germans say, Glockenspiel. Stuff like a marimba. We got a harp, which was added later on by an update. Big, big, big thumbs up to Audio Imperia for caring about their products and adding stuff when they notice that something's maybe missing, and they can give more value to a product that you've already bought. Really nice. There is no critical instruments missing in the percussion section, I would say, but keep in mind there is no piano. But very big strength of Nucleus, there is a choir. None of the other all-in-one orchestral sample libraries that I'm going to include in this video has a choir, and I'm not aware of too many others orchestral sample libraries, like all-in-one orchestras, that have a choir. It's a very welcome addition. Props to Audio Imperia. There are ahs and oohs sustains. And short staccatissimo phrases. This is good for background textures and epic wall of sounds. The choir is simple. There are no legatos. You won't write a sophisticated Bach chorale with it, but it's great to have a choir included in the Nucleus orchestra, and that's even separate into sopranos, altos, tenors, basses. Good. Now, because Nucleus caters to more modern orchestral music, there is also basic sound design. So they include drones. Drones are like sort of notes that you have at the very bottom, like this. You can, for example, go ahead and play a very long drone and then select the solo cello and improvise over it. Very nice. We got pads. We can tweak them. And there are sub-booms to add some low-end oomph under the orchestra. Here I would have loved to have a few more big trailer hits to help with that as well, but this is already really nice to have. Nucleus also has performance patches, which are basically more playable versions of their articulations. They combine articulations and make them very playable. Legatos, longs and shorts, all in one patch, just play. Cool. Nucleus runs in the Pyramid engine, which is simple yet powerful. I like it a lot because it has a few very nice features. First of all, what I really love, the variable sample start. What does this mean? Well, if you have the sample start at 0 milliseconds, that means that the samples will play immediately on the grid. So let's see with the metronome. It's in time, but the sample start is 0, which means it doesn't have all the information. It sort of cuts down the legato note transitions a little bit, so the realism isn't perfect. So you can set it to -250. You have to compensate in your DAW to put -250, and now it will again be on time, but now we have the full realism on the playback. So it sounds in time again, and the note transitions were a little bit more realistic because nothing was cut away. So what you can do is you set it to 0 milliseconds for maximum playability, and you record without lag pretty much. Then you put it at the end when you're done to 250 milliseconds for maximum realism. It preserves most detail for legato transitions, attack transients, and all the good stuff. You can also set it to somewhere in the middle for a good compromise. Just make sure that this value here and this value in your negative track delay in your digital audio workstation matches. It should be the same with a minus and without the minus. What is also really nice is whenever you run out of range, you can artificially add one more. So let's say for some reason I go below the lowest G for the violins, and maybe it's not realistic, but what we can do is, you know, if you really need that 1 or 2 more notes, we can have them. And as long as you don't overdo it, it actually sounds pretty good. And there are situations where you just run out of space and you wish, come on, can't you play like 1 note lower? With this, you can cheat a little bit, and it works pretty well. Another thing you should know about Nucleus is that there's Nucleus Lite as an affordable stepping stone into the world of orchestral music. It's very affordable, I think $79 on sale, and it has full ensembles with sustain and short articulations, and it's very playable performance patches. They're included too, as well as basic percussion. So you get like a glimpse into the world of orchestral music, and you can decide if this is for you, if you like it, and you can get the price of Nucleus Lite accredited to Nucleus Full if you upgrade. So overall, Nucleus is a great all-in-one package for aspiring composers who are looking for a modern, orchestral sound and who primarily want to write epic cinematic music, I would say. People like who love themselves a fat processed sound, they're gonna be happy with Nucleus. Where it lacks with advanced articulations, Nucleus shines through the inclusion of a choir, solo instruments, including legato articulations, and basic cinematic sound design. So you don't have to buy that separately for the beginning when you're starting. For that modern, processed sound, Nucleus would be my go-to all-in-one orchestra sample library right now. Next in my list of the best all-in-one orchestras is BBC Symphony Orchestra by Spitfire Audio. You can hear it's much more tame in the sound than, let's say, Nucleus, and it works better if you're composing more traditional or classical orchestral pieces. For example, let's listen to this example for the strings. Compare it to Nucleus. So much different, a bit rounder, a bit darker, quite focused and tight as well. The recording hall is not super huge. And with BBC Symphony Orchestra Core, which I'm going to talk about here the most, you get one mic mix only, no other microphone positions. And with the Pro version, you get a basically ridiculous number of mic positions. The Core version costs $449 regular price, and it goes down until $314. I've seen this, so around the ballpark of Nucleus, maybe a little bit more expensive. And BBC Symphony Orchestra has a little bit of a different inclusion of content than Nucleus. So with BBC Symphony Orchestra Core, you got full control over the standard instrument sections of the orchestra, I would say. You got strings, you got violin ones and twos, as opposed to Nucleus, where you only have violins, violas, cellos, and basses. With the brass, you got the same sections, like the trumpets, the French horns, the trombones. You get a bass trombone and a tuba. With the woodwinds, you got a piccolo flute, which was missing in Nucleus, flutes, oboes, clarinets, and bassoons. There are no ensemble patches, which Nucleus has, which would be sometimes nice for sketching. So here I actually had to load 4 instances of BBC Symphony Orchestra Core and couldn't just use one ensemble patch. Of course, there is percussion. There's tonal and atonal percussion. The tonal percussion has a similar selection to Nucleus. It has the timpani, the glockenspiel, marimba, and xylophone, celeste and tubular bells, as well as a few others. But often they have a few more articulations than the one in Nucleus, like, for example, dampened hits and undampened hits that ring out. The atonal percussion is a traditional orchestral percussion with hits, dampened hits, rolls, and ruffs. No big surprises here. There is no percussion for epic music like toms or taiko ensembles, huge hits or anything of that sort, so you probably won't be writing your next trailer track with BBC Symphony Orchestra. There are soloists, 7 solo instruments from the woodwinds and brass instruments, including legatos and a decent amount of articulations, for example like trills, marcatos, and multitongues. Nucleus has 8 solo instruments, so 1 more than BBC Symphony Orchestra Core, but they have fewer articulations. They only have legatos and staccatissimos, shorts. The ones in BBC Symphony Orchestra have more articulations. We'll play through them in just a bit. There is no choir and no fancy extras. There is a harp, but you don't get sound design, you don't get a choir, you don't get any sound effects. The Pro version of BBC Symphony Orchestra adds instrument variety. There are leaders of each string instruments, so like soloists, the first chair of the violins and violas, cellos, basses. There's a bass flute, bass clarinet, contrabassoon, English horn, contrabass trombone, contrabass tuba, and cimbasso. All of these instruments are not present in Nucleus or BBCSO Core. They're a little bit, I don't want to say unusual, but you don't need them in every orchestral piece. It's good to have them, but that's when you get the Pro version. BBC Symphony Orchestra Core has all the articulations of BBC Symphony Orchestra Pro, which is really important. It has all the same articulations, but it's like much, much, much cheaper. It's a lot of articulations. So we have legatos for all the instruments. Nucleus doesn't have legatos for all the instruments, and the legatos sound good. You can hear how the note transitions from one note to the other. The French horns struggle a bit with those repeated notes in the example, like here and here, because they don't have very good like tonguing recordings, I suppose, or none at all. But you can optimize the MIDI a bit and stitch multiple articulations together. So you would play this one maybe with one of the sforzando, for example, and the other one with the legato, and then you can really work with this MIDI because you have so many articulations available, much more than Nucleus. Do you always need long flutters or multi-tongues? I don't know, but it's definitely good to have. The solo flute and oboe sound great in this legato only line. You usually get one, maximum two different short lengths. So for example, for the violas, we have the tight spiccatos and then the staccatos, which are a little bit softer. And it sounds like this. Compared to Nucleus. Which is much more compressed and tight and processed. If these are not snappy enough for you, use the tightness slider. Here's the brass fanfare that we use with Nucleus, this time with BBC Symphony Orchestra. And because we have marcato articulations here, I took the freedom to play these longer notes with the marcato and not the staccatissimo. With Nucleus, we don't have that, so we only have shorts. Of course, we can just make it shorts only, then it sounds like this. Much more round and less piercing than Nucleus, but with a nice tone. Now with BBC Symphony Orchestra, both Core and Pro, we got a few advanced short articulations, like plucked strings, collegno, where you hit the strings with the wooden part of the bow, and the Bartok pizzicato, where you snap the strings against the fingerboard. There are lots and lots of long articulations, like for the strings, muted consordinos, accentuated marcatos, tremolos, harmonic, sul ponticello, as well as atmospheric flautando. Flautando is probably Spitfire's favorite articulation. Oh, and I can understand why it's so beautiful. Flute-like, very soft and cinematic. There is soltasto articulations, and for brass and woodwinds we got flutter tongue, multi-tongues, and more. There's a lot here. The solo instruments are great to have. It's a bit more versatile than Nucleus' soloists because they have more additional articulations that us composers use to phrase the music more precisely, where Nucleus would be more limited because it only has legato and staccatissimo. The percussion is focused on orchestral percussion and sounds pretty natural and realistic to me. This is Nucleus. The The tonal percussion covers the essential instruments with a good number of articulations. For example, for the timpani, we got hits and rolls and hits soft, rolls soft, hot rods, long hot rods, hits dampened. It's a lot. We got all of the critical essential instruments that we need: tubular bells, glockenspiel, marimba. There's a harp. Nothing missing here. What is missing is a choir. Also, there is no piano. There is no extra performance patches, like, where we could play in Nucleus the shorts and the legatos all in one patch, but the legato patches have this kind of automatically baked in. They do play shorts on short notes and go very seamless in the long notes. They are already super playable, so I would say these are already kind of performance patches. BBC Symphony Orchestra runs in the Spitfire player. It's their free proprietary sampler. There are, I would say, no extra killer features. Like it or don't, that's what it is. You got the articulations here, mixing options here. With BBC Symphony Orchestra Core, you only got this mix 1. With the Pro version, you got a stupid amount of mic positions that you can really use to mix the sound that you want. You can combine note articulations by holding Shift. Very nice. And there are some effects here, like, for example, the tightness slider that I've shown you before. BBC Symphony Orchestra also has a Discover version. It's completely free. It's a great as a first touching point with an orchestral sample library. It has a simple UI. Just pick your instruments here, the articulation here. And it has all the usual instruments, actually, from the strings, brass, and woodwind section in their basic articulations. There are no legatos for melodies. There's even some basic percussion. And it has a harp. It's completely free. Really good. It doesn't have that super lush sound of an orchestral hall, like, let's say, Air Lyndhurst. Spoiler, we'll hear about that one in the library we talk about next. But overall, it has a pretty tight and round, maybe darker tone. Listen to the demos again to really get a feel for it. BBC Symphony Orchestra Core is similarly priced as Nucleus and has a much less processed and hyped sound. It includes all the articulations that you really need. There's legato on every instrument. You can have advanced playing techniques which make it more versatile for orchestral scoring work, but it doesn't come with some of the extra features that Nucleus has. There's no choir, no solo instruments, no sound design. BBC Symphony Orchestra Core is on the relatively affordable side for an all-in-one orchestral sample library, and it's Nucleus's direct competitor here, I would say. I would go with BBC Symphony Orchestra Core. If you're more interested in mocking up Tchaikovsky and Brahms, go with Nucleus. If you love Two Steps from Hell and epic cinematic music on the YouTube. It's hard for me to justify the $999 version for BBC Symphony Orchestra Professional for beginners, for those extra 12 instruments and the gazillion of extra microphone positions. It's like a $500 step up from BBC Symphony Orchestra Core, and the value for money is definitely lower here compared to Core. It really comes down to how much usage these custom mixes with the microphone positions give you, and what you can do with them, how much you depend on, let's say, your bass flute or your contrabassoon. And if you need those extra instruments, I would actually recommend using the next all-in-one orchestra instead, which is incredibly packed with content. If you want to learn how to make great music with these sample libraries, then go enroll in orchestral music production for beginners. These all-in-one orchestral sample libraries won't teach you how to compose the music of your dreams from home without reading sheet music or playing the piano since you've been a child prodigy at the age of 6. This course here will teach you. The next all-in-one orchestra, this one is a highlight. Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. Spitfire Audio shook up the world of orchestral sample libraries in a pretty bold move. They repackaged their older but flagship orchestral sample libraries: Spitfire Symphony Strings, Symphony Brass, Symphony Woodwinds, Symphony Percussion, Harp, and Orchestral Grand Piano. And out came one heck of an all-in-one orchestral sample library: Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. Nucleus has an out-of-the-box, tight, processed sound. BBC Symphony Orchestra has a more restrained, round, and a bit darker sounding sound. Spitfire Symphony Orchestra is a blockbuster sound with a lush hall sound that's very organic but also cinematic. It carries a lot of room sound from the Air Lyndhurst Hall, even without an external reverb. Or with the individual instruments. There are 4 microphone positions to balance the orchestral sound to our tastes, more options than with the modern versus classical mix of Nucleus or BBC Symphony Orchestra Core's One Mix, less options than the insane customization of BBC SO Pro. Honestly, for me, this is sort of like the sweet spot. I mean, keep in mind that every mic position increases the download size and the RAM usage. I think this is more than enough. It's great. You can have the close sound or very ambient sound. And of course, mix them as you wish. SSO costs $629 regular price, and it goes down on sale currently until $440. It's more expensive than Nucleus, more expensive than BBC Symphony Orchestra Core, more affordable than BBC SO Pro. And I would say this is currently the best all-in-one orchestral package, hands down. For once, because of its huge amount of content. Where BBC SO Pro goes all out on microphone positions, SSO has the most instruments and instrument playing techniques available. Spitfire Symphony Orchestra benefits a lot from the fact that it's made from, yes, older, but full, expensive flagship libraries for strings, brass, woodwinds, and percussion. This results in full control over pretty much all instruments of the orchestra. For strings, we got, of course, the violin ones, violin twos, violas, cellos, basses, and an ensemble patch. The brass comes in multiple section sizes. We got solo horn, 2 horns, 6 horns. Of course, there's a bass trombone and tuba, everything you need. Woodwinds have the piccolo, they have the alto flute, the bass flute, next to all of the other instruments you need. It has a contrabass clarinet, a bass clarinet. The percussion is insane. There is so much stuff. There's tonal percussion and atonal percussion. In my opinion, SSO has some of the best tonal percussion, tuned percussion section for an all-in-one orchestra, hands down, where the Air Lyndhurst Hall really shines. Again, with the usual suspects: timpani, glockenspiel, xylophone, marimba, and some more. The atonal percussion is super nice sounding. It's deep sampled percussions with multiple articulations, lots of different drums. We got the typical orchestral percussion like in Nucleus and BBC Symphony Orchestra. Here's the comparison: BBC Symphony and Nucleus. And again, SSO. So very hall-y sounding. It's a big, nice orchestral hall. On top of that, we got a lot more percussion here. We got congas, bongos, wood blocks, tons of small and high-pitched percussion. We've got tom ensembles, great for energetic, epic music. Really, really good percussion selection. Much more stuff than in the other libraries. Now, there are lots and lots of solo instruments available for brass and woodwinds, but no dedicated soloists for the strings. SSO does have more soloists than any of the other all-in-one orchestras. For example, the solo flute has 11 articulations. It's much more nuanced for delicate orchestral music than Nucleus's basic soloists that basically cover only legato, long and shorts, which suits its purpose. And in SSO, it's even a bit more than in BBC Symphony Orchestra, though you probably won't use all of these. There's no choir, but there's a harp, and there is a grand piano. And it's a piano that is sitting very nicely in the hall. So this one really blends nicely with the orchestra, unlike many other, like sampled piano libraries that sound very in the foreground because it's just a sampled piano. It's hard to mix it together with the orchestra. This one is mixed in the seating where it would be in the orchestra, and it's very nice to have. Now, there are really nice curated ensembles with pre-orchestrated instrument combinations for instant mood. Great additions. Nothing for sound design or trailer effects. It's a purely orchestral sample library. Now, we got legatos for pretty much all the instruments. Seriously, you use those performance legatos where you can just play without thinking. It didn't have a problem at all with those short notes. It immediately picked the right short articulation. The legato note transitions are really good here. Let's check out the French horns. Not a huge fan of the French horn legato here. Like, the legato transitions sound a little bit bumpy, or like as if there is a horn in the background behind the actual horns playing that you can hear, like, sort of doing the transition. Maybe that's like the response from the hall. I'm not sure. Something feels a little bit off here to me, but again, it will be much better in the solo flutes and the solo oboes. Very nice tone. You got multiple short lengths and variations. Here's the brass fanfare. So yeah, it's nice. It's maybe a bit weak if you compare it to the really piercing one from Nucleus. Here's again the one from BBCSO. Spitfire often has the brass not go sort of all the way, let's blow up the roof, like for example Pacific Brass by Performance Samples does. But it's good. There's lots and lots of long articulations, even more than in BBC Symphony Orchestra. Tremolos in multiple tempi, major and minor third trills, and all of the articulations covered in any of the other all-in-one orchestras. Like for the strings, we have muted concertinos, accentuated marcatos, tremolos, harmonics, sul ponticello, as well as atmospheric flautando and soltastos. There's advanced effects articulations like rips for the brass and overblown flutes. It's good that there are those performance patches, very handy for beginner composers who might get overwhelmed by all those many articulation choices. So just pick the performance one, play and enjoy. Spitfire Symphony Orchestra runs in the free contact player, not in the Spitfire player, so it's pretty straightforward. Overall, Spitfire Symphony Orchestra is the most complete all-in-one orchestra and the best value for money in my opinion. SSO got the signature sound of Air Lyndhurst Hall, great if you like it, but check out the orchestral sample library that I'm showing you next if you prefer a more close and dry sound. This one got 4 microphone positions, plenty enough for most composers, all of the instruments you can think of, and pretty much every playing technique out there. It's not perfect. Think about that French horns legato example where I didn't find it quite perfect, where maybe a dedicated brass library like Cinematic Studio Brass, Afflatus Brass, or Tom Hokenborg Brass would have gotten a better result. But it's a fantastic package that opens up the entire world of orchestral composing. It's got great tone, tons of content, big thumbs up. Now we're coming to the last one in my best all-in-one orchestral sample libraries list, Vienna Symphonic Library Synchron Prime Edition. This one is a collection of VSL's flagship Synchron range of orchestral sample libraries packaged into a very capable all-in-one orchestra. You can already hear that it's got a tight and precise sound of a scoring stage. It's brighter than the dark sound of BBC's Symphony Orchestra. And less hyped than Nucleus's modern mix. Now, Synchron Prime Edition recently got the Flow View update that made the UI a lot more intuitive and usable for me compared to the very technically looking graphical user interface of the Precision View. This one is the Flow View. You just pick your instruments here or the section and then you pick the instrument here. This one was the former Precision View. To be honest, I don't really like it. Maybe I'm too stupid. It has got tons of sliders and faders and options. It's too much for me. Yes, you can select so much stuff. I'm really glad that we have this now. And yeah, I'm a simple guy. Now, this update really brought Synchron Prime to one of the top spots as a first full orchestral sample library for me. I like using the very handy mixer presets for close and classic, white and ambient sounds. I find them very useful. Here's the classic sound. Switching to white and close. I like white. But you can hear the bass sound is much more tight and close than with the other orchestral sample libraries. It costs 595 euros regular price and it goes down on sales until about 445 euros. So it's sort of in the SSO range, Spitfire Symphony Orchestra, with both being repackaged collections of full dedicated section libraries and tons of content. For the higher price of Synchron, you get more deeply sampled instruments than Nucleus and more instruments and section sizes as BBCSO Core. In Synchron Prime, you got a lot of instruments. For the strings, violin 1, 2, viola, cello, basses, and ensembles. Okay, cool. But also in multiple section sizes. For example, you got 8 violas, but you got also 4 violas. You got a full ensemble and a reduced ensemble. This is something that the other all-in-one orchestras don't have. There are no string soloists though. For the brass, we got pretty much everything we need. Trumpets, French horns, trombones, bass trombones, tubas with soloists and actually 2 different soloists each for trumpets and for horns. So we have like a horn 1 and a horn 2, trumpet 1, trumpet 2. We got piccolo, flute 1 and 2, and actually, there are no section woodwinds, so you don't have two flutes together, but there is a flute 1 and a flute 2. So you got to combine them to make your own 2 flute section yourself. Same for the oboe, clarinet, and bassoon 1 and 2. We got English horn and a contrabassoon as well. So some instruments that you wouldn't see in Nucleus, you wouldn't see in BBC Symphony Orchestra Core, but only in BBCSO Pro and Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. The percussion, for the tonal percussion, again, same instruments as the other orchestras: timpani, glockenspiel, xylophones, celeste, tubular bells, but no marimba. Anyway, everything sounds good and nice. The atonal percussion is a focused collection of orchestral percussion. Sounds like this. BBCSO, Nucleus, and Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. No big surprises here, and it's in line with what BBC Symphony Orchestra and Nucleus offer. Definitely less selection of instruments compared to Spitfire Symphony Orchestra, but a good starting point if you don't have a dedicated percussion library yet, like Damage 2 or Hans Zimmer percussion, something like that. There's soloists for pretty much every instrument except the strings. There's no choir, there is a harp, and there's whirlwinds. Huh. That's an interesting addition. We've got actually a tin whistle, a shakuhachi, bansuri, and a dizi. A very welcome surprise. Now with Vienna Symphonic Library's Synchron Prime Edition, we get legato for all instruments, including sliding portamentos for strings, and different first note attacks depending on how hard we press the key. The legato note transitions, I would say, are neutral, tight, and agile. There's not a lot of gliding and sliding going around, except of course when you trigger the portamento. Same for the French horns, they get the job done. But good. Great job in the solo flute and solo oboe example. The short articulations adjust the note attack speed, I think based on how fast the notes play. So you got the bold and agile attacks here, based on how fast you press. Very nice feature. So fast note passages can sound nice and snappy and not have notes blur into one another. In the precision view, you can further fine-tune them. Here's the brass fan, for example. I kept the universal articulation, so it actually plays long notes where the MIDI notes are long and not just silly short notes without thinking, so to say. Pretty good result, considering that we didn't switch any articulations ourselves. Let's compare the tone again. BBC Symphony Orchestra. Also tight and focused, but definitely softer and rounder. Nucleus. Much snappier and tighter. And Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. Very hally, very ambient, I would say. Now, in Vienna Symphonic Library Synchron Prime Edition, what a name. There are not a lot of crazy articulations that we've seen, especially in BBC Symphony Orchestra and Spitfire Symphony Orchestra. Instead, Synchron Prime focuses on the bread and butter long and shorts, important signature articulations, of course, like pizzicatos and tremolos for strings, and we got vibrato control. You won't find flautando, sul tasto, or flutter tongue in Synchron Prime, but the world woodwinds are very nice. So with Synchron Prime, you got a solid roundup of instruments and articulations for orchestral compositions. It uses VSL's Synchron player, needs to be activated in iLok, but with a free iLok cloud account, it's not much of a hassle. So great orchestral package, Synchron Prime Edition. It includes some of VSL's best instruments. It feels quite complete besides those tons of extra articulations that Spitfire Symphony Orchestra impressed me with. The mixer presets are great to get a specific sound with one click. The strings have additional smaller section sizes that I haven't seen in another all-in-one orchestral library yet. Very useful. Like here's the 4 cellos. Very useful. The tone itself is less hauly, more snappy, but not bone dry, unless you only activate the closed microphones. Personally, I love Spitfire Symphony Orchestra's tone a bit more for lush and big blockbuster soundtracks. It sounds a bit more alive to me. Synchron Prime can get much drier with the closed mics, and together with a smaller section size, this can open up opportunities for more chamber-sized music that would be impossible to achieve with any of the other libraries in this video. So it's about what you prefer. Compare the sounds and listen to the demos of each of these and decide which one you like more. I love the new Flow UI and find the precision view to be a bit too complicated and technical for me. Overall, Synchron Prime Edition is one of the best orchestral collections out there with lots of instruments and a detailed sound. It's a great all-rounder. Now I want to give a few honorable mentions that are also great orchestral libraries but couldn't get a space in this list in detail. One of them, Sonoscore The Orchestra Elements, is a curated selection of instruments from the orchestra lineup with different arrangements and presets for instant film scoring vibes. Great one, check it out, it's free. Next one, Spitfire Audio Abbey Road 1. This one has a gorgeous, gorgeous sound in a famous studio, Abbey Road 1. No legatos here, so it's very expensive considering that it doesn't have legato. It has lots of costly add-ons required to complete the collection, but the base library, even without the legatos, is absolutely stunning. Check it out. And last, we got East West's Opus. A huge amount of content. It's available in the East-West Composer Cloud. This one is huge. It's got some interesting orchestrator functionality, tons and tons of instruments, a very good orchestral package. I really hope that this list helped you get an idea which all-in-one orchestral sample library is best suited for you, your needs and budget. There are many other great orchestral sample libraries out there, so don't forget to do your own research. Subscribe for more, and I will see you soon.